morning. This is Paul. I'm bringing you the first part of a multi-part series on my first expedition, if you will, on building a surf rod. So it's a little bit different than building an inshore rod or a much shorter rod. Obviously, you've got a lot more guides to think about and the placement of the guides. And to do things right, I'm worrying about the height of the reel in the reel seat to work my way down the length of a 13-foot rod, to do reduction guides, meaning guides that start off near the reel and working the line as quickly as possible, efficiently down to being parallel and close to the rod itself, and then working its way out through the running guides that take you out to the rod tip. I'm finding out that, you've got a lot of things involved here, a lot of careful measurements, and I'm using some high-end components. This is kind of a bucket list item for me. So I've been watching hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos, seeing, advice and wrapping techniques and wrapping choices and thread sizes and guide sizes, guide placement, finding the backbone, the spine of the rod blank, making your determination whether you're going to do a conventional reel or whether you're going to go ahead and do a spinning reel. So let me start showing you what I've got here. Hold on. So here we go. So, replicating somebody else's math and hard work, obviously a form of appreciation and respect for what somebody else has been doing. I've got two of my rods here that are off the shelf, if you will. One is Mark Burford's over the bar 13-foot rod. It's a 3 to 5 ounce heaver here that currently has a Pen Fathom 2 conventional reel. And then next to it is one of Tommy Farmer's rods. This is a Gen 2 Cast Pro series. This is a 12-foot 3 to 7 ounce that right now I have a spinning reel. What I'm finding out is conventional reels and spinning reels have different distances off the rod right at the beginning. I mean, how far the neck, if you will, of a spinning reel stands up and off of a reel creates a distance here, from the closest it could be to a reel all the way around to how far away from, being even further away. All of that needs to be considered as the line's coming off the reel and hitting the first guide. And then these are measurements that we have to think about, so not only the ring size of your guide, but also the height that the guide is off the rod. So if you're going to start off with this is probably a 20 millimeter ring, but it's not very short. I don't have all the measurements and specs, and I didn't want to bore you with all that kind of stuff. But anyway, you can see that there is a distance from here to the rod. So I'm going to call this closer to the rod compared to what I'll show you next. And with this being closer to the rod, you actually need to be further away from your reel, because you need all of this space, and especially a spinning reel. Now, a spinning reel that I would only be using braid with. So braid is not going to be creating the big loops as the line is falling off the reel, basically. But still, you're going to have some twirl or, the loops as the line comes off the reel. And so these loops have to get in place to be able to make clearance without drag through the first ring. And a trick a lot of the rod builders do is actually put that first foot on, or the first guide on, backwards, using basically the frame. So this is what I would call 3 legs and 2 feet. The feet are what actually hit the rod and what you wrap on, and then the legs are what leads up to it. So this makes it a little bit stronger. So now taking a look at Mark Burford's Over the Bar 13, which is a 3 to 5 ounce rod. So the difference between these two rods, obviously the Over the Bar is 1 foot longer, 1 foot and change longer than the Tommy Farmer rod at 12 foot, but they're both what they advertise to be, 12 and 13. But this is, as it shows, a 3 to 5 ounce lure weight, and Tommy's rod here, the one that I've bought, is a 3 to 7. So what I'm finding is the 7 ounce upper end of its recommended lure weight actually gave it a little bit stiffer tip. And I'm not comparing apples to apples here, so it's not going to be a discussion of which rod I like better. They're both fantastic rods, and they're both well built. Mark's second generation went to Fuji guides, but right away, that's where I want to see if I can get these side by side to show you the choice of guides. So this is the first guide that the lines would come to. So Mark's Fuji guides here are actually standing off from the rod a little bit further. So the first ring is a little bit smaller ring size than Tommy's. This is, I believe, a 19 on Mark's rod, and I think this is at least a 20 or possibly bigger. I've got my little measuring device here that I could, really zoom in. But again, I'm not trying to get into, that kind of detail right now. But anyway, then the guide spacing changes. And again, it's not apples to apples because we're talking about 2 different rod lengths. But both have performed wonderfully on all sorts of fish coming in from the surf, large stingrays, and so on. So anyway, this led me to how I was doing my choices. So I had to pick a set of guides, and I went with the Fuji Alkanite rings, and in the gunmetal gray. Fuji is just fantastic. So let's start taking a look at what I'm doing here. Sorry for the mess in my mad scientist garage, but I know exactly where everything is. So anyway, the lower end of my new rod, this is a mud hole blank that I picked up the week of iCast. On my way down to iCast, I stopped at Mud Hole and spent quite a bit of time going through all sorts of selections. I'm going to do a purple theme. I've decided to do a purple theme. I initially started off wanting to do more like a navy blue and gold theme, and maybe that's the rod I'll build. I've actually signed up to go to a class in September. So before I go too far nuts on this rod, I'm doing things that I'm picking up on. So I spent a lot of time working on finding the spine, the backbone of this blank, and going through basically 2 or 3 different ways of doing that. And then once I found it, I put some masking painter's tape around the rod and marked the center point of the spine. I've done that a couple times. I did it up here also. And to decide on what I was doing. First and foremost was the importance of getting the right guide. So my first guide, I'm going to do the same thing, basically stand it on the blank backwards. The geometry or the physics of how this ring is mounted this way actually lets some of the line hit this to work its way into the first ring. So this is going to let me do both types of reels, both conventional and spinning. I would not necessarily need to do this if I was doing a pure conventional reel, but I decided, since my two other examples over here have all started that way, I'm not going to try to mess with success here. So I'm copycatted that with my Fuji guides, and my first one is a 19, size 19, and its standoff is very similar. I guess it's closer to matching what Mark did. And then also the distance from the top of the reel seat here, I've gone with a Fuji reel seat also, and I've already done a bunch of static measurements and so on where I want the reel seat based on how much of a butt length that I wanted. And even down here, I've practiced with a piece of heat shrink on where I would be lining up. I have masking tape measurements. Well, the masking tape's gone, but I have the measurements written down for how much clearance my rod butt needs, and also playing around whether I'm going to do a heat shrink solution going back into the rod butt here, or whether I'm going to I've put some black thread wrap here. But basically what I'm doing is I'm hiding the very edge, the beginning of the shrink wrap. That's going to protect the shrink wrap from catching on going in and out of a rod holder or whatever. But so this will, razor blade off real easy, along with the heat shrink. Because I had a couple different sizes of heat shrink that I ordered. This is a high gloss heat shrink, so it's a little bit different than your standard flavor used in electronics, electrical work. So I have a 3/4 inch and I have a 1 inch. And the goal always is to use a diameter that you can closely match to what you're trying to heat shrink over. That way you're not relying on just what the heat shrink physics can do. You just don't want anything extra. And certainly you don't want to end up with wrinkles if you're trying to shrink something too big on something too little. Excuse me. So, and then this little thing, this was just like, this was like a little reflector rod or something used to this little fiberglass piece. I've been using that to practice different knots and thread wraps, trim bands, just getting used to what all that's involved, and burnishing down, keeping wraps tight, and so on. And it only takes doing this a few times before you get the hang of what you're doing, and then also being able to spot if something goes sideways. Up here, I don't know if I can get it in more light or not, but what I did here was basically used two threads, two A-size threads. I used purple and black, so I don't have a lot of contrast here. But what I did was furl those two threads together, and you're doing that by putting it on my my hand drill here and spinning it with a paper clip holding a loop of the string. And after you get a whole bunch of spins, you're keeping it straight, and then you feed in another line, and they wrap up together and actually stay put together like that, so that you can wrap basically one thread. It's thicker, it's twice as thick as what you started with, or it's the sum of the two sizes, but you get to lay it down side by side, and basically it gives you an illusion of changing colors, a lot of randomness there. I'm going to try and do this wrap again with what I've decided to use is a gunmetal gray and purple. So putting those two together, I should have some instant contrast, and end up with something. And again, I would test all of this out on a piece of unused thread or unused fiberglass here, just to see how I like it, and make any tweaks. This is definitely a hobby that you want to measure 50 times and cut once, or measure 50 times or decide 50 times before you commit, because once you commit, you've committed. The other little trick, so I put all this together. I had all the guides on here lined up to the spine, so the same thing on the tip section here, or the top section of my blank. I found the spine on here and marked that with tape, and then I've used this is a silicone tubing, and you cut little tiny pieces. You cut like a 1/4 inch at a time off, and it becomes a rubber band. And you start at the tip and you roll 2 pieces down, and this is much easier said than done, but once I got it down here, I'm quite happy with it, because you could probably almost go fishing with this, because this rubber band, the silicone, is really hanging on to that foot. At the top here, I took one of my glass beads, tied a knot, and ran 80-pound fluorocarbons. I had a real old spool of offshore stuff from 20 years ago. I doubt I'll ever fish with it again, but once I've drawn taut the bead against the tip here, running the line all the way through to the end, and then taping it off at the bottom here, what I've ended up with is a beautiful way to find the center. And then, I don't think this is going to pick up too well, but basically I've got perfect alignment now, because I'm running the line and I'm looking down on it, and I'm making sure that line is cutting my guide feet in half. And I've done that all the way up so that I don't have anything kink one way or the other. And all of this, before I did this, I actually had a reel on this. I used this tip with the lowers of one of my, actually I could fit this rod tip on either one of my rods here. So I used something that already had a glued handle and so on and so forth. But the main thing there was I was using a reel seat and the reel that I'm going to be using. So I did it for both, and then went through what they call a static bend test, or a static deflection test. And so I hung a 16-ounce sinker off of one of these reels and let the whole thing bend, and actually that wasn't good enough, so I wedged it underneath the car tire, and I was bending it as if I had the conventional reel on it. I did the conventional reel first to make sure that my guides, and I had enough of them, wouldn't bring the line down crossing over the blank. In other words, the line stayed inside the guides. I didn't have any line taking a shortcut against the rod anywhere, against the blank, and certainly making sure that the line didn't go below the blank. So I started off with rough measurements to get myself close, and then I used the static deflection test to really tweak in, moving them up and down. So I have no idea what these measurements are. I can take them, but the main thing here was the physics of the rod bend, to make sure that I wasn't, that the rod was distributing the load. So I've done all that, and then for my wrapping choices, what I then did is off the foot of each So I've got the guides where I want them, and now I'm looking at where the foot ends. And now I've measured out. I used 2 additional pieces. I'm a half inch. I'm a half inch off. This is 1/4 inch masking tape. I used a half inch off the end of the foot because the wrapping of the foot is going to start a 1/4 inch off. And what I'm planning to do is do a complete under wrap between the masking tape here on each guide. I'm going to go from the inside of one masking tape all the way across to the other, and I'm going to under wrap all of these with silver, or the gunmetal gray. So I'm going to do the gray on the bottom, and that's, the guide would come off, and then I'm going to just do a single wrap from masking tape to masking tape. And then I'll put, using my marks and so on, I'll get my feet back in place and wrap the guides onto the silver, onto the gunmetal with my purple. So the purple is what's going to be seen on top of that gunmetal gray, and I'm going to follow that theme on all the wraps. I'm going to come all the way up like that. And then also do something like that for the tip. Now up here at the tip, I might put both colors. I'll just do a line change, a thread change, and maybe do part purple or part silver, and then finish in purple. So once I have the base coat wrapped, I'm deciding I'm going to go ahead and do some finish on that, a very, very thin coat. But basically trying to seal the cracks between the thread. These are both A threads, and the conventional wisdom is you want a thinner line on the bottom, so an A thread is fine to do the under wrap, but they recommend a thicker line, a thicker thread to do the top wrap, because as you're torquing down, pulling the line thread tight as you're wrapping on top of the feet, you don't want that thread to cut itself in between your undercoat or your under thread here. These are both A's, so I'm going to go ahead and put a very thin coat of finish on top of the gunmetal first, and then after that's all done and dried and all that, then I'll go back and place the guides down. What else was I going to say about that? So when I put the guides back down, so I can see that I'm lined up. I like my little jig here using the fluorocarbon and a glass bead at the top to get my whole center line. You don't have to use a laser. You don't have to sit there and mark each guide. This is just an awesome way to very efficiently figure out how you've got everything centered. So I'll be doing this again when I actually put the guides on, and I'll get the same physics going, because then I cut these bands so that they'll be held down. I'll hold the feet down with some 1/4 inch tape just to get it in place, and then once I start my wrapping, the masking tape goes away. But I should be able to get all the geometry back, marking my center line. Things on the lower thing, there's a lot going on here. I talked a little bit about the shrink wrap and so on. But rod butts, there's a bazillion of them, right? And, or maybe you didn't know, but man, there's, the inside diameter, how much taper, what's the depth of it. The main criteria for me was to make sure that I could get my rod butts, or this rod, into my sand spike. And it goes in just perfect. So it goes into the rod guides, or my sand spikes, just fine. And also the tube extensions on my cart. This is 1 1/4 inch PVC that I have sitting down, using rod extensions here to the stock. I dropped it in there. But using the rod extensions, or tube extensions here, just keeps your rods from rattling around as much. But anyway, I can fit that down in there. So I've got the right size rod butt that I want, and it fits on the end here fine. It fits, it lives happy with my shrink wrap going on. So like I said, there's just a zillion of these considerations that you have to put yourself through before you start getting the glue and epoxies out and all of that. And again, the rod seat, I have that where I want it. I have the top of the rod seat and the bottom of the rod seat marked. So this is where I would set up my bands and goop up big time and get that spun to match my spine on this piece. Anyway, sorry for the long video, but there's a lot going on. So wish me luck. I'll do another video as things progress. I just wanted to give everybody kind of a show and tell here on how you get started with all of this. And like I said, there's tons of details. Your reduction, so this distance here is real, and how far up the rod, but how far up the blanket goes is a function of what reel you're going to have, and you want a nice, easy, in other words, you don't need the line rubbing on the guide the whole time. Obviously, this is going to make for smoother cast, further cast, less friction. So I have this standoff, and then actually here, these are the same ring sizes, this guy here and here, but I don't know if you can see, I'm still in a path of reduction. So this one is a little bit closer to the rod than that first one was. And then I go from this, I transition to the same ring size, but now this one's even closer to the rod blank. And then now I finally get down to a couple 12s here, I guess is the size. I put two of those together just to help everything settle. And then my running guides here are all size 10s. Size 10, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 guides, and then the ring tip is also a size 10. So this keeps, once I get down in here, this is keeping the line very close to the rod blank. So in other words, the action of the rod is going to be felt the whole time, so as the rod bends, the line is going to stay parallel to the rod. And this was load tested just fine with both the conventional reel, which is how I'm going to end up having a conventional reel on this, but it also did fine for the spinning reel. I think if you are picky and choosy and you go through all these measurements and you slide your guide spacing around till you get what you like, you do all of that for the conventional reel and the torques that you're putting on, because basically conventional reel, you're fighting it like this. The guides are all up. And then when you do a spinning reel, you're fighting it just the opposite. Everything's down. I started off with a spinning reel, and then I went to conventional, and I didn't like how some of the angles looked on the line. So I left the conventional on there, got all of that perfect for a conventional reel. And then when I put the spinning reel back on, the spinning reel had no complaints about staying right where I wanted. I didn't have any harsh angles from one guide to the next. So the criteria for fitment on a spinning reel is a little bit different than the fitment for, and then here's my Alkanite guides, the Fuji guides. So these are all the Alkanite. These are all Alkanite Fuji guides, Fuji reel seat, the mud hole blank. You guys can leave in the comments if you need any specs on that. But this is going to be a 13-foot surf rod, hand-built, homemade, made in USA rod that lets me check off my bucket list. All right, well, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.